Getting that even crust across a very big steak is really tough, but there's a trick to do it flawlessly that I don't see anyone ever talking about. Now you're first going to want to grab your steak, and I have here a nice bone-in ribeye. This piece is about 2.5 pounds, and typically you want the thickness of your steak to be at least 1 inch. This steak right here is a little less than 2.5 inches, which will give us plenty of room to develop a nice crust on the outside, but not overcook the inside of it. And just so you know, this is also a prime steak, which has the highest grading in terms of intermuscular fat. Prime being the highest, then you have choice, and then you have select, having the least amount of fat within it. But because this is prime, it's also a bit more expensive than your typical steaks. Now to prep this steak, we're gonna grab a sheet pan as well as a wire rack, and then we're gonna rest our steak on it and grab ourselves some salt. We're gonna wanna heavily season this sucker on all sides with salt, and even the fat cap as well. I'm opting for a dry brine here, so we're gonna hit it with a ton of salt on all the sides, and then we're gonna throw it in the fridge overnight. I think this is the best and easiest way to properly season your meat. The salt will penetrate deep in there, pulling out a little bit of excess moisture on the surface, but in the end, you'll get a beautifully seasoned steak through and through. Now you could just do a 20-minute dry brine, but this is a very expensive cut, so I'm gonna do the overnight dry brine. I don't wanna skip any corners here. The next day, you'll see our steak has changed quite a bit. All that salt has dissolved, penetrating deep into the steak, fully seasoning it. Our steak now is slightly firmed and dried out, which is a good thing because it'll give us a better sear and crust. Now I'm gonna grab a paper towel and brush off any excess salt. Usually the fat doesn't absorb all of it like the leaner meat does. And now I'm gonna move our steak to the side to just do a little bit of chopping work. The first thing we're gonna grab is 1 shallot, and we're gonna cut off the tip and then split it in half, as well as peeling off the outside layer. These shallots are a little bit discolored and ugly, but that's okay. I don't want them to go to waste. Now for 1/2 of our shallot, we're gonna cut off the root and then split it in half, giving us some nice planks to work with. The other half of our shallot, we're gonna mince, so we're gonna do vertical cuts along the top, and then we're gonna run our knife through it, mincing it nice and smoothly. And if your knife skills aren't great, don't worry, just run your knife through it a few more times and you should get a beautiful, nice looking mincing. I'm gonna set our shallots to the side, and now I'm gonna grab 1 head of garlic. I'm gonna break apart the garlic by crushing it with the palm of my hand, and I'm gonna grab usually 2 cloves, but these are really large garlic cloves, so I'm just gonna grab 1. To prep that 1 clove, all we're gonna do is just lightly smash it again with the skin still on it. Now the last thing we're gonna grab and chop are our chives. Now I'm just gonna lay my chives on our cutting board, and I'm gonna run our knife through it nice and smoothly. Take your time with it and get small little chivy bits. And now let's cook our steak. I'm gonna grab a large stainless steel saucepan, which is required if you want a proper sear. Non-stick can work, but it's just not as good. I'm gonna set our pan to medium-high heat, and I'm also gonna head on over to our oven and set it to 350 degrees bake. Now I'm gonna grab our steak and then dab it off with a paper towel. It's pretty much dry, but any moisture will prevent a really good sear, so make sure it's fully dry. I'll now hit it with a little bit of black pepper on both sides. Unlike other spices, black pepper could take a lot more heat before actually burning. Once your pan is preheated, we're gonna grab a little bit of high smoke point avocado oil, and we're gonna drizzle a little bit in there, and my pan was actually a little too hot here. You want a little bit of smoke, but I could tell it was gonna start getting really, really smoky, so I quickly discard that oil and let the pan cool down just a little bit. Once it's cooled, I'll drizzle in about 2 tablespoons of avocado oil, and then it should be lightly smoking, and then from there, we're gonna gently lay down our steak into our pan away from us to prevent any splattering. I'm also gonna apply a lot of pressure onto our steak to really get a solid initial sear. This first initial sear will be about 1.5 to 1:45 seconds, and then once I flip it, you can see that we already have a decent initial crust forming. I'll give the other side another 1.5 sear, and I'll place my chef press on top of it, and I'll use my tongs to focus any tricky spots. Now I'm gonna sear both sides one more time for about 1 to 1.5 minutes, and I have 2 helpful tips for you guys. An important note, you wanna be making sure you're watching how much smoke is coming out of your pan. If there's a lot of smoke coming off of it, you wanna lower or just cut the heat and let it slow down a little bit. If there's no smoke at all coming off of it, it's not a hard enough sear, so you wanna bring that heat back up. The next tip I have is to fix any of those non-seared sections of your steak. What you're gonna do is tilt your pan to the side, and then with the spoon, baste that hot oil over that bald spot. I basted it for around 30 seconds, and as you can see, that is a huge difference difference to what it was before. Now I'm gonna sear the fat cap as well for about 1.5 to 2 minutes. I usually like to do this first, but I forgot to do it, which is okay. Now we're gonna infuse more flavor into our steak by butter basting. I'm gonna soak up some of that excess oil and fat with a paper towel, and then I'm gonna throw down 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. I'm gonna bring our heat to low, and then I'm gonna throw in our garlic as well as our shallot planks, and then once the butter starts to foam up a little bit, we're gonna start basting it over our steak. Now, typically for like a 1-inch to 1.5-inch steak, you could just keep butter basting it until you reach your desired internal temperature, but because the steak's so thick, it'll take way too long to butter baste it. So I'm only gonna do this for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna throw into the oven to finish in there. Now, you can also throw some thyme in there, but I forgot to buy some, so I'm just gonna throw in some of our minced chives and baste that over our steak, and I like to do this around the minute before I'm gonna stop basting. Now, our steak is looking pretty stunning, if I do say so myself. Now, we're gonna check the internal temperature, and as you can see, it still has a heartbeat. Again, this is a super thick steak. Typically, you only have to sear and butter baste for any 1 to 1.5-inch steak, but because this guy's so thick, we're gonna have to finish it in the oven, so I'm gonna move it over to a wire rack, drizzle all that butter on top of it, and then throw it in our 350-degree oven for around 8 to 10 minutes. While that's in the oven, we're gonna quickly make a pan sauce with all the fond that's left in our pan. I'm gonna throw down the half of our minced shallots, sauteing them for about 30 seconds to a minute at medium-high heat. Next, I'm gonna throw in 85 grams or 1/3 of a cup of red wine. Any red wine works, just don't use expensive stuff, and make sure you scrape the bottom of your pan to successfully deglaze it. From here, I'll next toss in 15 grams or 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, making sure to mix it in thoroughly before pouring in 170 grams or 3/4 of a cup of chicken stock. Now I'm gonna leave this at high heat and let this pan sauce fully reduce until you have about 1/4 left. Once it's reduced, we'll then toss in 3 tablespoons of butter, 1 tablespoon at a time, making sure to mix it with the heat turned off. Once all the butter is incorporated, we'll add a little salt to taste, and now you have an amazing pan sauce for our steak. Speaking of our steak, I took it out at the 8-minute mark, and it's looking pretty stunning. The internal temperature is around 123, which is good because it'll probably carry over to 130 after we let it rest. Which brings us to our next tip. You have to rest your steaks after cooking them. I'm gonna let this steak rest for 10 minutes because the temperature is gonna still be increasing while it rests, and trust me on this, it gives you a more juicier and tender, flavorful steak if you let it properly rest. A little patience goes a long way here. Now let's cut this sucker open. I'm gonna start by removing the bone, which all you gotta do is just run your knife alongside of it as close to the bone as possible, and that's it. It should come out very easily. Next, we're gonna separate the cap from the rest of the ribeye, which is super easy. All you gotta do is just run your knife in between the 2 sections and separate them from each other. I'm gonna go ahead and slice the center part of our ribeye in nice thick pieces. You can see here we have a beautiful medium rare consistency through and through. I'll next go ahead and slice our cap as well, and we have a beautiful medium rare consistency as well there. Now all you gotta do is plate this sucker, hit it with some of our red wine sauce, and decorate it with all of our minced chives, and enjoy what is probably the best steak you've ever had in your whole life. I was incredibly mind blown at how good this was and how simple it is so long as you follow the tips. If you like steaks or anything red meat related, check out my video on the best method to cook Korean short ribs. Thank you so much for watching this video.